dose of acarbose. So this has got tremendous benefits as far as the inflammatory markers are concerned, given to patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus. So this is again effect of acarbose on gut microbiota. This is a crossover study where they have used first placebo, then acarbose, and they have shifted those patients who are on placebo to acarbose and acarbose to placebo, and they have found out that patients who are on acarbose had the GI microbiota change significantly. Persisted until 6 months. So of all the available anti-diabetic drugs, probably alpha-glucosidase inhibitors, in particular the acarbose, has been found to have a favorable alteration in the gut microbiota in comparison to the other drugs which are available for the management of patients with type 2 diabetes. So we do have some unexpected side effects with like bloating, flatulence and all those things if you use higher dose of acarbose. But these people have found out that molecular hydrogen acts as a novel antioxidant, so that could also be of little benefit in these patients. So in summary, what I would like to tell you is dysbiosis of gut microbiota is increasingly appreciated as a mechanism accounting for diabetes and other metabolic diseases like obesity, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which has been renamed now as metabolic associated fatty liver disease. And gut bacteria use polysaccharide substrates as fuel for their growth and conversion to small chain fatty acids. And small chain fatty acids have beneficial effects on the host energy metabolism and inflammatory response. Acarbose and metformin show that they promote the gut microbiota in a favorable way, and acarbose treatment significantly increases the level of useful bacteria, including Bifidobacterium longum, and acarbose is the only alpha-glucosidase inhibitor that allows polysaccharides to enter the colon and large intestine, and that facilitates production of small chain fatty acids and hydrogen gas. Thank you for a patient hearing.
Thank you, sir. Huge topic, but completed on dot. We'll take questions at the end.
Coming to the next topic, I would like to invite Dr. Jake Shrikant, and the topic is basal insulin optimization, moving closer to glycemic goal. Thank you, Dr. Shrikant.
Thank you, chairpersons, and then thank you, Dr. Faraz. It's always been a pleasure to be amongst you people, almost 4 to 5 years. And this time I think Faraz has given me a challenge to play a T20 match. The subject which has been assigned to me is basal insulin optimization and moving closer to the glycemic goal. It's a familiar topic for most of my senior colleagues, but I think the juniors would be definitely interested because it's something to do with the routine practice. Yeah, the things which I'm going to talk would be 3 issues. The insulin paradox. Are we really waiting or after initiating to fail? Just start off and then wait and watch. The second issue which I'm going to talk is addressing the so-called unmet needs. The hypospells, the weight gain, Basically, it's the basal insulins which is going to be the answer. The third would be how to intensify rather than just lying low after initiation. The insulin paradox. Are we waiting to fail? In the sense, most of the physicians are hesitant for various reasons. You have the patient's inertia, the physician's inertia. All these things have been well talked about in various forums, and I'm not going to repeat it. But after 2 decades, we are still long away from achieving our targets. See this, 85.9 of diabetic patients using insulins and OADs, and 79.3 patients using only insulins are still out of target. And we have the diabetes which is progressing, which also necessitates the use of insulins, the early use of insulins. And if it is not done initially, early, this would definitely increase the associated comorbidities and lead to the worst outcomes, well documented in various trials. Here, the titration is something which is extremely important, and this is going to be the crux, which is going to predict the long-term outcomes in the maintenance period. More than 80% of the maximum treatment effect, that is the HbA1c reduction, is going to occur in the first 12 weeks of initiation. So this 12 weeks is going to be the crucial part. Mind you, the junior postgraduates or the PGs who are really interested, it is the 12 weeks. So just be vigilant. The early response predicts the long-term glycemic control. With 12 weeks, the HbA1c maintained up to 24 months. See, after 12 weeks, you may expect a slight drop in the HbA1c and a small uptitration in the insulin levels. But the crucial drop happens in the first 12 weeks. The other side of it is early hypoglycemic spells definitely is going to double the risk of future hypo events. This is something which most of the clinicians are scared, and they dreadful complications they try to avoid. And early hypoglycemic spells definitely would increase the risk of treatment discontinuation. So keep these things in view before you really make the effort to initiate the patient on insulins. The key to successful management of glycemic control is, again, the adequate titration. Type 2 diabetic patients remain uncontrolled 6 months after basal insulin initiation is largely because of inadequate titration. Again, I repeat, we start off and we are trigger happy, and the things progress steadily underneath. So first, the basal insulin initiation, up to 12 weeks, you have the titration period. And then later on, after 12 weeks, it is a maintenance period. So, friends, I think the first 12 weeks, as I was mentioning, is going to be the crucial one, and it can make the difference for the patients with diabetes. And you start off with 0.16 units per kg and with the HbA1c of 8.8 with the fasting of 195. The titration period, within 12 weeks, you see the drop, almost 1.4%, and the fasting especially comes down by almost 75 milligrams. During maintenance period, that is from 12 to 24 weeks, there is a marginal increase of insulins, but the HbA1c reduction is almost minus 0.2%. So also with the fasting. So much of the reduction happens during the titration period, but maintenance period is equally important. The next question is, this is the same thing which I'm going to skip the things. Glargine 100 plus OADs with adequate titration can help the patients achieving sustained control almost not just for 6 months or 1 year, but almost 2.5 years. And we have enough data. Say starting from 8.7, within 3 months the drop is 7.2 and steadily maintained. For 32 weeks it is around 7. And with a marginal increase from 14 to 23. This is the insulin requirement. The second issue which I was mentioning was tackling the hypospells, the risk of hypospells and the weight gain with the basal insulins. Look back 2 decades ago, we were having the so-called sliding scales, which are totally giving rise to ups and downs and then roller coaster rides with regards to blood sugars. This was put to an end with the advent of basal insulins. Very low risk of hypospells with Glargine 100 versus the co-formulations and premix insulins. And these are the various comparative studies. This is BiasPAP 30 and then the classical human premix and then IDEG-S, which is the Rhizodec confirmed hypoglycemias. This is definitely less with Glargine U100 at 52 weeks. Take all the 3 types of insulins, and definitely the risk of hypoglycemia is comparatively less. So also is the weight gain. Almost with comparison to BiasPAP 30, it is 35% less, and with the so-called the recent Rhizodec or IDEG-S, it is 36% less. So here also, the basal insulins, the titration, up-titration and intensification is definitely going to help. So when do you consider the intensification in type 2 diabetic patients? Is it necessary? The answer is yes. Because there is always a decline in the first phase of insulin secretion post-meal. That results in the postprandial hyperglycemia, and as Dr. Attawalla has already elaborated, the Asian population, there is increased risk of CV events with regards to postprandial spikes. So this is extremely important, the significance of postprandial hyperglycemia. And if you don't control this and just make an attempt to bring down the fasting, this is not going to achieve the target, because this creates a tremendous oxidative stress which leads to endothelial dysfunction and inflammation and the cascading effect leading to worst CV outcomes. So there are various types of intensification. Basal prandial intensification, the most physiological way to intensify the insulin therapy. It very closely mimics the normal pancreatic insulin secretions, and basal insulin suppress the glucose production by the liver between the meal times and also overnight. The prandial insulins, they take care of the postprandial surges. These are the basic advantages of the basal prandial intensification, which I am sure that most of the senior colleagues and me too, and Dr. Mosam also would agree. This is a standard practice during these days, whether the patient is in the ICU or whether he's in the ward. This mitigates the postprandial excursions, fewer hypoglycemic spells, and very low weight gain. Dosage titration would be required for both basal and prandial insulins, and thereby it is more user-friendly, and this can be increased in a stepwise manner. Basal insulin concept, usually we start off with either after OAD failure, or in fact, if the HbA1c is hovering around 8.59, the starting dose is around 0.2 to 0.3 units per kg based on the HbA1c. And this can be titrated based on the target fasting blood sugars. Fixed fasting blood sugars, this is the time-honored statement. And basal plus or basal plus plus concepts have come later. Either you can give basal bolus or a basal prandial. Basal constant background, at least 50% of the daily needs. And bolus usually covers the meal spikes. Usually it has around 10 to 20% at each meal. So these are the options for intensification for basal insulin therapy. You add a prandial insulin or you switch to premix insulin. The single dose of prandial insulins will cover the major contributor of the postprandial excursions. This is how it goes on. You give it here and then you can see the drop. Basal plus insulins and the advantages and comparative studies with the premix insulins. You have a greater flexibility and higher treatment satisfaction with basal plus insulins. Premix insulins, on the contrary, have higher rates of hypospells and less adaptable in terms of specific glycemic needs, especially for patients who have irregular meal patterns. These are all the studies. Intensification with glargine is definitely associated with low risk of nocturnal hypoglycemia when compared to the premix insulins. These are the different studies. For want of time, I am just rushing through. As I have mentioned, it's the T20. So these are the differentiating aspects of various types of bolus insulins. You have predominantly rapid-acting insulins and regular human insulins. And these are the parameters which have been taken into consideration. So these are the salient features of adding glulysin to the basal insulin therapy. Almost the same. You see, it reduces the total daily. The advantage is lesser insulin dosage requirement. So intensification steps, they go like this: initiation and titration. As per the ADA 2023 guidelines, HbA1c above target despite inadequate titration or basal insulin dose if it is more than 0.5 units per kg. And insulin intensification usually done with the prandial insulins. Initiation with 4 units and titration increase by 1 to 2 units or 10 to 15% twice weekly, every third or fourth day. And be careful and watchful against hypospells. And you can lower the dosage by 10 to 20%. So these are the advantages. Even in terms of cost, they have made a comparative study with idagesp. It is working out to be around 3,000 for idagesp, but 1,400 per month for glargine, 100 plus glulysin. So definitely in a developing country like India, this is cost effective.
It's time up, sir.
So take home messages are very clear. This is the most recommended and accepted way of managing the patients for optimization. Basal plus intensification with rapid acting insulin or insulin analogs. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for the patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Srikanth, for taking us through the insulin optimization. It was very clear. Thanks. It is a marathon, rather a walkathon from morning to evening. So I request Dr. S.G. Mozam to take us through interchangeable glargine. Dr. Mozam, please.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here and addressing and being addressed by this such august gathering, plus the faculty we have over here. Thank you so much, Dr. Faraz. And so I would like to start with a lighter note because everybody is so sleepy and they're willing to go home. So it's relevant to my topic. See, there is an incidence of two Nawabs in Lucknow had happened to land up at the station to board the train. So there was a young Nawab who comes from the new this one, and there's an old Nawab. But the legacy of the Nawabs is the same. So one of them said that, Pehle aap. And it continued with the other person also. He also said, Pehle aap. And they were continuously saying, Pehle aap, and nobody was boarding the train. And the train moved on. So this is what it is, how the diabetes moved on. But the hesitancy, the dogma of hesitancy always starts with initial amount of hesitancy to initiate the medication. So that's the relevance to my topic, the interchangeable glargine hitch to awaken to a new glycemic control. So, but today I'm going to remove this, unravel this hesitancy with my topic. So, which is? Pointer. This was the speaker pointer. Thank you. So basically, I will start with the real case scenario. This is a case of a 52-year-old lady and diabetes for the last 10 years, and then she has been taking oral medication ever since, and she has been on metformin. And over a period of time, after a couple of years, she also started using glimepiride and sitagliptin. And the clinical lab parameters, as you know, that since the duration of the disease is too long, the BMI is around 25, weight 70, vitals are fine, systemic examination normal, no further inputs in terms of her any complications that have already set into the system. So diet she consumed, mixed diet, calorie intake, almost around 1,500 kilocalories, and she walks for 20 minutes per day for 5 days a week, and the lab values are almost, HbA1c is 9.1, and fasting 182 and postprandial is very high, which is reflected by the HbA1c. Now, what could be the next option which we would like to use now? So, whether we go for the OHS or we'll go for insulin. Well, I think looking at the duration of the disease, the progressive nature of the disease,